So, in the last episode, we talked with you about why it might be helpful for you to think about scaling beyond your therapy practice and hopefully got you all inspired and worked up and ready to go. So, we want to talk to you now about how you can go about developing a new income stream. We're going to go step by step for you, and just keep in mind that we're going to go in depth about each of these on future episodes.
So I remember the first summer that I developed an online course. I had the idea in my head, and I thought that's a brilliant idea, so I should build a course around it. And I spent I spent like over 2 months that summer developing it, creating the outline, doing all the stuff, setting it up on the online course site, and then no one came. No one bought it. No one showed up. It actually wasn't meeting the need of people. The pricing was completely wrong. It was a total mess. I didn't have a plan to market it. But the good news is I learned a whole lot, and I never repeated that process again. But that was a big part of, when you and I started talking about this before doing this episode, as to why we want to save therapists from these mistakes that are quite common.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, what do you wish that you would have done first?
Listened or asked people.
Yeah.
Ask people what they actually needed besides or instead of just assuming that because it was a thing in my mind or something that I might want to buy, that someone else might want to buy it as well. And I think this could be said about any kind of business, right? This could be this said of like, hey, I think opening up a taco shop could be really cool because I really like tacos, or I really think
Right.
down on Market Street it could do really well. It's like business owners get in a lot of trouble all the time by just assuming. So that's kind of the first rule to follow is just don't assume.
Yep.
That's a very kind of limited way of starting a business, and I don't want you to waste your precious time and feel defeated after your first go round of creating something and then being really disappointed when it doesn't do what you thought it would do. So with that being said, what's the first step when you're thinking about developing a new income stream?
So, I think you have to separate out what you're passionate and excited about with what is an actual problem for
Mm,
people that needs solving.
yeah.
And so, when you're thinking about what's someone going to buy, they're going to buy something that fixes a big problem that they're
Mm.
having. So, step one is identify a pain point or a problem and think through some options for solutions.
We overlook this in the work we do as therapists, but the reality is we solve problems of all kinds in the therapy work that we do, right? If the problem is I'm anxious, well, that's the problem. The delivery might be therapy, and your training might be CBT, but we get lost in all those details without really just thinking about like, how can I understand my customer or my client's problem even better than how they understand it? Because what that does, again, it makes sure that what you're going to offer is actually going to be useful, and therefore there's going to be demand for it. And it also really kickstarts your marketing when you really sit down and, put in the time to think about what is this problem? How do my clients talk about it? Or how do my potential customers talk about it? How can I use some of that language, right, to start to facilitate a process of developing an idea and eventually marketing the idea, but knowing that right off the bat, that's not necessarily what we need to be thinking about. So once you've identified a solution to a big, painful problem, and I would say go after the bigger problems that exist out in the world.
Mm-hmm.
Don't go after smaller problems. So when I started helping therapists in 2013, and people always ask me, they're like, oh, you're obviously the marketing guy, or you love marketing. It's like, well, I don't necessarily love marketing. I just, that was the biggest problem that I saw therapists having since 2013. And I still see it as a huge problem today. So I went after it and I started to tackle it. I like what marketing can do for therapists, but again, it's not the thing that gets me out of bed in the morning.
Yeah.
It was what people were telling me they needed help with. So I started to develop solutions to help them with that problem.
This is why therapists are the perfect people to be developing any sort of additional income stream,
Mm,
because most of the time our passion is about helping people. So if you're passionate about helping people, it's easier to listen and like listen for those big problems. And it's also easier to listen to your audience about what they think about your potential solution to those problems rather than like, I just really want to make some cool shoes. Like
Yeah, yeah.
that person wants to make shoes. That's what they're passionate about.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
like you, online therapy isn't the thing that I'm most passionate about, but it's a solution to a problem that I hear therapists having about their lifestyle. So here's a solution I could provide. I can train you how to do this thing that's going to not only allow you to keep doing what you love, helping people, but it's also going to allow you to live the life that you want, which was the major, major pain point.
Hmm.
So I agree. If you're more intent upon helping people than you are on selling your own personal, passionate idea, you're
Hmm.
going to get much farther.
So once you've identified that problem, then you move into number two, asking your target audience what they need about what they need around this problem, right? So if you think, or in your case, if you think, okay, I'm seeing a lot of therapists wanting to start an online practice, then what's the holdup, right? Like, what's the challenge? What's getting in the way? You could go out and ask 10 or 20 or ideally 100 of those therapists, how's your online practice going? What are your biggest challenges? What do you wish, what kind of help do you wish you could get around those challenges? Even just doing that, you'd be doing more than 80% of business owners at large.
Absolutely agree. And it all, like, every one of these steps really comes back to listening to your
Mm.
people. We'll talk later about getting the people, but
Yeah.
listening to your people and then responding. I mean, I've had lots of times where I was like super stoked about the next idea that I was going to share with people. And then when I really listened, that was not the idea they were stoked about. They wanted something else. It was something else that I wasn't even really excited about or knew how to do. And I had to teach myself how to do it in order to give them what they were wanting.
Mm. Yeah, we can get really fired up about our ideas, and that's a good thing. But also sometimes it can mean we follow the wrong path for a bit, because we didn't really stop and listen. So the good news is therapists are professional listeners. We are professionally
Hmm.
trained listeners, but sometimes we don't do that. When someone says, "Oh, what does the market say?" or "Have you done quote unquote market research?" Sometimes we get overwhelmed by that, and it's like, "Well, how do I do that? I don't know how to do market research. I'm not a market researcher." Well, create a survey in a Facebook group.
Yep.
Again, just don't overthink it, when it comes to getting feedback from the kinds of people that you want to help. Start with whatever you know, right? Whether that's your 5 therapist friends, or your graduating class, or a slightly bigger group again, or a free Facebook group. There's so many opportunities to actually engage with people who need help with their problems, and sometimes we just really overthink it, and we skip
Hmm.
this part entirely. So once you've done that, so once you've identified a solution to a big painful problem, you've started to ask your audience about that problem. Number 3 is plan and pilot a service or product for a small group of either beta testers or just a small kind of initial cohort that can go through your service or product or whatever. I would suggest either at a low cost or even free really early
Hmm.
on, especially when you're not sure what this idea even is, what does it look like, how is it for me to deliver it, what's it worth, etc. But the important thing is to take that idea, and before you put all your eggs in that basket, right, or spend all summer developing the course like I did, maybe do a version of it with a smaller group
Hmm.
of people to get deeper into this kind of process of getting feedback.
Yeah, really. I mean, this will save you so much time and so much money. Lower your expectations about what you need to deliver. This is an iteration of your product. So you do not want to build out something completely. You want to provide something that you think will be useful and is an iteration, knowing that these are your founding feedback people and they're going to give you lots of help and your product is going to evolve so much over time. Give yourself some space to just do the damn thing.
Yep.
Don't wait until you think it's perfect and then get feedback that 50% of it needs to change.
Yeah.
Give a version out into the world. Preferably, I agree, for free is better.
Yeah.
Clean it, make it a little bit nicer, and then launch it again. Maybe beta test it again
Yeah.
and really start learning what it is that people respond well to, what they like, and what parts of your message really resonates with folks.
So the fancy business term for this would be minimum viable offer, right? Or minimum viable product, right? It's basically like, what's the most simple version of what we're creating that will still solve the problem for people? And we can worry about the fancy stuff later, or the branding, or the, the quality of the videos that we're doing for the MVO or the MVP, whatever you want to call it. But if you were to really think about with that problem, what's the shortest distance between painful problem and ideal outcome? And what is that ideal outcome? Right. So again, in the work I do helping therapists get more clients, I'm always thinking about that. Right. So there's a lot of ways to get more clients, but what's the absolute shortest distance between where they're at now, so their current situation, and their kind of ideal situation that they want my help with? And if you really get to thinking about it that way, it's going to help you also start to trim the fat of your offer.
Which is so hard in the beginning because you
want to
really,
include it all.
oh my gosh, you have imposter syndrome like crazy. You want to include all the
Over
details.
deliver. Yeah.
And then they're just overwhelmed.
Yeah.
They just want an answer. Like, get me from here to here as quickly as possible.
Yeah. If I stuff more things into this box, it'll be worth more, because I'm doing worksheets and freebies and this thing and that thing, and going out and giving them my phone number too, just in case they're lonely at night,
I'm going to be all the things to all the people for one low price.
More doesn't always actually mean more. Sometimes it can just mean more to sift through for your poor customers. So with this pilot group, this is an opportunity again to really not only test your offer or test your minimum viable offer, and then to start collecting and integrating their feedback. So asking them really detailed questions about their experience. Did this solve the problem that you anticipated it solving for you? And get their feedback, both the critical feedback and the positive feedback. Yeah.
I was listening to a podcast recently, and it was so funny because it was exactly about this. And this guy had created this crazy, amazing membership site, and it was for religious leaders. And he just had so much great stuff in there. But when they looked at the analytics behind the scenes, what they were seeing was that no one was clicking on anything except for the lecture that he provided for the Bible study group. That was the only thing anybody clicked on. And so they were paying this membership rate to be able to download his pre-done lecture for Bible study. And it was a PowerPoint and had a couple worksheets. He was able to cut 90% of his workload out and just keep selling the membership site, because this was the only thing that these folks wanted. It was just such a great piece of, like, pay attention to the feedback.
It can't be a one-way street. It's like if you sat down with every therapy client and you just talked for all 50 minutes, and at the end you're like, hope that was good, I'll see you next week. And they're like, but also
I wanted to say this one thing. When I was 2, oh, that's a perfect analysis.
Which, there probably is someone doing therapy out there like that, but bless their hearts. Let's not be that person. So once you've tested your offer, you're collecting and integrating feedback, you're getting a bit closer to what might be a more formal kind of launch, which again, we're going to get into all that coming up and in future episodes. But you've taken that feedback, you're starting to integrate it. What do you do next?
You got to price that puppy.
So again, the same thing with assuming. A lot of times we can assume we know what something is worth, but what it's truly worth to your customers is really up for debate, right? Mm-hmm. So I think there's an art and a science to pricing something, but a kind of science component of it is, I was once told, your pricing should reflect about 10% of the total kind of result that it's going to produce for someone. So in my case, if I'm helping therapists build a business that's going to go from $0 to $100,000 a year, so I help them earn $100,000, then 10% of that would be $10,000. So I could have a product or course, et cetera, or coaching program that has that value, because I know it's going to produce a tremendous amount of value. It might not always be that easy to price based on kind of the results, or the results might be more intangible, or like you might be helping a client lose weight, through a coaching program or something. But again, you want to think about, what is that worth to them? What would it be worth to me? right? Or if you have
Hmm.
a struggling child as a parent, what would it be worth it to you if your child was thriving again? And in general, I do think you should price a bit higher than you're comfortable with, because most of us just have problems charging what we're worth, both for our clinical hour and then especially when it comes to a new product or offering or something like that. We tend to really, I think, price on the lower side of things because we're also self-conscious about the
Hmm.
offer in the beginning.
Agree.
Mm.
And I'm not sure if you'll agree or disagree with this, John, but I think that we do underprice ourselves. However, in the very, very beginning, I would rather have a slightly lower price and
Sure.
be able to go up each time
Mm-hmm.
than to put a price out there that the market can't handle and
Mm-hmm.
then not sell any and have to reduce afterwards. Because
Mm-hmm.
that just psychologically feels real bad for me and probably for the people who are looking at the product.
Yeah. I would agree. The first time I successfully launched a course, I priced about where I thought it should be, but I knew there was going to be more value to it, right? But I needed more testing. I needed the iterations and the feedback from my course students, right? I needed
Mm-hmm.
their testimonials, etc. So I was able to double the price the second time around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So speaking of testimonials, say
Mm-hmm.
more about that.
So number 6 is gather testimonials for what's called social proof, and social proof is just a comment is it's just a marketing term for showing people that other people trust this product or service, right? It's why a ton of marketing for anything, whether it's for an iPhone or that guy selling car parts, it's why it's highly centered around, is this a trustworthy product or service or restaurant for that matter, and therefore should I put my precious resources into it? Like, should I even go to that restaurant or bring my family to that restaurant? So social proof is really everything, and when we don't have it, we're just kind of working our marketing at a bit of a deficit. Obviously,
Hmm.
the work we do clinically is a bit different. There's a lot of nuances around that we're not really talking as much about in this particular episode. But again, when it comes to a product or service, etc., something new, you have to get that social proof. That social proof and the language that your customers use about your product or service tends to be way better than any language you could come up with.
That is so true. And I like to combine my getting feedback with my asking for some testimonials. So I always do a satisfaction survey midway through whatever I'm delivering and then again at the end. And it includes questions in there about, so what would you just say to somebody who was on the fence about taking the course? Or, how would you say you started feeling at the beginning of this and how are you feeling now at the end? Or what are some of the biggest takeaways? Or what have been the changes in your practice since you've taken this course? It's great feedback for you. And it's also a way to get some really helpful testimonials. And we'll do a whole episode about testimonials to be able to put it out there in the world so that people, when they're listening to you talk about your product, they're assuming that you might be a little bit biased.
Mm-hmm.
But when they're hearing from other people who've already done it, then they're going to give that a little bit more credence than they're going to give to what you say about your own work.
Some people get hung up on, I don't have enough testimonials or I only have 2 or whatever it is. Start with what you have. And don't be shy about asking people for testimonials, especially again, if your product or service is actually valuable.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, you are going to get some critical feedback that's going to be difficult to take, but that you take critical feedback and you use it to make your product or service better, right? You don't take it personally, but then you go and you also ask for the customers who have had a positive outcome. Ask them for a testimonial as well. Ask them for a video testimonial. It's a lot of
Mm,
therapists have a hard time doing that or feeling like I'm going to be a burden to someone if I'm asking. I'm always amazed that when I just go out and ask, that people are usually more than happy to do that favor for me, and they don't expect anything more in return because they've already gotten so much value from the thing that I sold them.
right. And they're
Mm.
excited for other people to do it because they want to help other people too.
Yeah.
So connecting the two of you is something that feels good for
Mm.
them.
Yeah. It's genuine.
Awesome.
What's next?
So we've done a lot of testing, beta testing. We've gotten a lot of feedback. We've narrowed down our price. We've gotten testimonials. Now we have all the pieces in place to do a formal launch of the product, putting it out there in the world in a big way. And in order to do that successfully, we're going to have to learn how to market and learn how to launch a product.
I think the word launch can get a lot of people overwhelmed, and it can mean a lot of different things,
Mhm.
right? So what's your kind of take on that?
The first time I
Because
launched,
you're also
I
right in the middle of launch,
followed,
or just finished a launch, I
right,
should say.
just finished a launch.
So you probably have a lot
The
to say
first
about
time
it.
I launched, I followed like a launch formula, and it was really effective. It was many, many steps. We can help you, but it was many, many steps. And I remember feeling very overwhelmed and that the launching process was harder than the actual product delivery. It
Mm.
was harder than delivering my course or creating my course, mostly because it was unfamiliar.
Mm.
But as I learned it, and then as I got more and more connected to my people, the less I had to go through a very specific launch strategy. And this last time that I launched my product, it was so easy. It was the easiest launch that I've done, and it made exponentially more money than any of my other launches. So when I think about what it really means okay, I've got something that I want to share with people. How do I warm them up? How do I get them to make sure that they remember who I am? Because hopefully it's people you've had an ongoing relationship with. Warm them up, give them some really good loving and free products and free services, and remind them how helpful I am. And then over a period of time, I'm going to slowly tease that I have this thing that they really want, get them hyped up for it. And then by the time I put it out there in the world, they're like just chomping at the bit to get it. That's the
Mm.
ideal kind of launch to me.
Mm.
What about for
So,
you?
well, to put it simply, a launch is really just building excitement around the sale of your thing. In this case, it's usually a course or it could be a membership site, etc. You're just building engagement and excitement around that thing, leading up to a time limited kind of offer, right? So if you
Mhm.
launch your course twice a year, that means the doors open and close just twice a year, which has a lot of other marketing benefits as well. But ultimately, doing a launch or not doing a launch is really up to you, and it depends on a lot of different factors. Some people like to, just do it once a year. That means you're going to have more work around that one time of year.
Mhm.
So it might put more pressure on that launch if that's, where you're relying on most of your income coming from. But then again, once it's done, once you've gone through it, you've kind of batched your stress in a way around that launch. Um, on the other hand, launch could just mean you're taking your new idea or service or product to the market, right? And launching it officially, and the doors are going to be open, kind of ongoing, which is actually how my course works. So there's just different ways of doing it. And I think what's important is that early on, you also just get some help with it, right? So you've worked
Absolutely.
with someone around your launch. I've worked with someone around my launch, and not having done it before meant there was a ton of stuff that I didn't know, even though I know a lot of other things about online marketing. This was just a whole
Mhm.
different beast. So I think getting help is going to make all the difference.
How would you separate out? So we have two pieces here. We have marketing and launching. How would you separate out the difference between marketing and launching?
I'm stumped. It's a good question. So, well, in my case, I'm kind of always marketing, and that I'm always kind of uh, building an audience, for lack of better
Mhm.
terms, right? I'm always kind of putting stuff out there, gaining interest, building my email list, producing different kinds of content, etc. So I'm always marketing in a way. It's just that depending on what's going on in my business, I might be launching something different, right? So I might be launching the course or launching a new, semester of my mastermind group or something like that. So part of it just depends on your model, right? For some people, their
Mhm.
entire business is one product. And in that case, all of your marketing is kind of centered around your launch. So you could be, marketing in the summer and saying, stay tuned because in December, we're going to do our yearly launch.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, that feels very consistent with what I think about it. That marketing for me is sort of a year-round process. It never feels like marketing to me because it's just helping people,
Yeah.
you know? And that's kind of my marketing MO is just be
Mm,
helpful. Be nice and be helpful, be a decent human. And then launching is like a really concerted marketing effort. Like
yeah.
I have to think more about it. I'm more strategic and I kind of order things in a particular way, and which is why I needed help figuring out what that process should look like.
So the reality is, don't let the the stress or the uncertainty of launching, or even the idea of launching, get in the way of you rolling out your new offering to a group of people. And again,
Yep.
it could be a small but meaningful amount of people that's then going to set you up for the next iteration of your offering. So, people, sometimes people get too obsessed with like having a huge launch or making X amount of dollars, when in fact, you would be better spent, your time would be better spent really going deeper into your product versus just trying to have really fancy marketing and sell a bunch of something that is not necessarily really solving a problem for people, and helping your reputation long term. So
We are so on the same page about this.
that's good. No arguments here. So let's say you've marketed and launched your idea, which again, we're going to talk a ton about in future episodes. That leaves us with number 8, which is really a plan to scale. And we've talked about this idea of scale before. But when we talk about scale, you're going to be scaling both your marketing and your systems, right? So if you're kind of launching a course, let's say, then you're going to need to have enough marketing to sell that course, however many times you want to sell it. And you need the infrastructure to sell that course, whether that's a payment processing system, or if you do Q&A calls, you need a video room big enough for those people. If you do customer support or something like that, you need the resources to kind of manage all that. So once you have a viable offer, you've got some testimonials, social proof, you've started to market and launch your idea, then you really just need to be thinking about, okay, how am I going to do this, but help more people, and really take this thing to scale.
Mm-hmm. I think a really easy way for therapists to think about this is when you first start your practice and you have maybe 5 people show up coming into your practice, you might do things that work, but if you had 50 people, would never work. I know I definitely did this. I was like, I'm going to email each person their intake paperwork. And like, I was changing the prices on the paperwork each time. I mean, I was in the minutia.
Oh, yeah.
But as soon as I got a bigger practice, that was not possible. There was not time for that. And so I had to streamline my processes. I had to systematize things so that I wasn't having to be so deeply involved. And the same thing is going to happen if you have an online income stream. In the beginning, I was doing a lot of things manually because I could, and I was also learning. And then as it got bigger and bigger, doing it manually was going to take so much time that I had to think about, okay, is there a product that I could buy that would do this for me? Is there a way for me to make this a cleaner process? And that's all scaling really is how can we allow the thing to get bigger without our effort having to get exponentially bigger as well?
Totally. Or without stuff breaking,
Right.
But yeah, I think it's a good thought exercise for therapists is to think about, even if you're, let's say for a second, you're setting up a small solo practice and you text all your clients a reminder before the session. There's a lot of therapists that do that early on. They go, yeah, I can do it now because I've only got 10 people or whatever.
Yeah.
It's the wrong way to approach business. So even at that stage of business, I really want all therapists to be thinking about, how would I do this for 50 or 100 or 200? Or if I was a big practice, how would we do this at scale? Because the reality is, whatever pain points you have now on a small level or on a small scale, those pain points just multiply and scale with your scale. That's the word of the day. And people don't often realize that. And so what happens is when they try to scale, they either have major profitability issues, or those kind of friction points along the way just scale up with the rest of your business.
If you think about efficiency in everything you do, and you think my time is really, really valuable, how can I make this more efficient and have the same potency, just more efficient? You're going to save yourself a ton of time and effort. And you know what? If you don't, no big deal, because you've just learned along the way and you will do it next time and make things more efficient.
That's it. Speaking of efficiency, should we wrap up our 8 steps and kind of recap?
Let's do it.
All right,
Let's
go
do
for
it. Okay. So number 1, you want to make sure that you've identified a big problem, preferably a big painful point that you would like to solve for people. And you're going to come up with some ideas for solutions. So that's number 1.
Number 2.
Number 2.
Oh, I was
Go
gonna,
for
I
it.
was gonna do the back and forth thing. I thought that could be
Okay,
cool.
let's rotate. All right, go.
It's like reading in class, and the students are like, "All right, Amber, you read paragraph one, and you read it." And then if you were a kid like me, you're always counting the paragraphs to figure out which one you're gonna have to read and getting really anxious for
Ditto.
no reason.
Yeah,
Number
I'm
two,
not going to do that now.
ask your target audience what they need around this problem.
Yeah, so you're just checking in with them to see if what you've already come up with is going to be useful. Number three, you're going to try that thing out. So maybe they said, yeah, you've got the problem. That solution sounds good to me. And so now we're going to actually roll it out and try, and you're going to do it with a small group of initial testers.
So with that testers, number four, you're going to test your offer with a kind of a subset of the market. And with that subset, that small initial group, you're also going to collect and start integrating their feedback into revising your offer.
Then you got to figure out how much you're going to charge for that. And you're going to listen to 50 podcasts trying to figure that out. And ultimately, you're going to probably go with the original price that you thought of. Number five, you got to narrow down your pricing.
Number six, gather testimonials for our new term of the day, social proof. You've got to get other people's words describing your product or offering. It's going to be way more powerful than any fancy words you or a copywriter can come up with. You're going to integrate all of that into what will eventually become your marketing.
You got it. And now we're going to market and launch that product formally out into the world.
Finally, it's just making a plan to scale. So thinking about, again, what are the pain points and friction points of doing this offering or service, et cetera, right now, and what would those look like at scale? And that's it. What could
You're
be so hard
done.
about that? So easy.
Easy
Now go
peasy.
start an online business.
We'll see you next week. We want to see you making lots of impact and lots of income.
More to come.